She stalked humans for sport, until one caught her. Instead, the forest wasn't silent, it was holding its breath. Moonlight dripped between the towering redwoods, cutting pale silver across the leaves as a lone human sprinted for his life. Behind him, something moved with effortless grace, leaping from branch to branch, its claws whispering against bark. She had hunted dozens like him, soldiers, criminals, survivors, all of them prey in her eyes. Tonight was supposed to be no different. But as she stalked him through the trees, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not hunger, not thrill, a pulse of danger, because this human wasn't running, he was leading her somewhere. Rain had not yet started, but the sky warned of it, a deep, rolling heaviness hanging above the forest like a held breath. The moon sliced through the thick canopy in thin white blades, illuminating patches of trembling leaves and damp earth. The night smelled of cold moss, old bark, and something fresher. Something warm. Human. Lyra crouched high on the massive branch of an ancient redwood, its bark rough against her palms. From here she had the perfect vantage. Her obsidian black eyes tracked the figure running below, moving swiftly through the undergrowth. Most humans ran awkwardly, clumsy in the dark, stumbling over roots, gasping loudly as fear overtook them. But this one, he ran with a strange calm. His breaths were measured, his pace controlled, not sprinting, not flailing. He wasn't trying to escape, he was navigating. Her pupils narrowed to predatory slits. That alone intrigued her. Her hunts were supposed to be tests of dominance, symbols of her clan's superiority over humans. She had claimed 37 trophies since her ascension to the hunter's right. Men, women, young, old. She did not discriminate. Only the hunt mattered. Only the thrill, the precision, the moment where she leapt down unseen and ended the chase with a single blow. But tonight, the thrill felt different, muted or perhaps inverted. She shifted slightly, letting her claws sink into the bark for stability. A tiny shower of dust rained down as she sprang from the branch, landing without a sound. The forest accepted her presence as it always had. She moved like a creature woven from shadow and silence. The human was only 20 paces ahead now. She could smell the sweat on the back of his neck, faint but unmistakable. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't afraid. That alone made her lips curl. "Come on," she whispered to the trees, her voice touched with a rasping purr. "Give me a reason to enjoy this." But instead of speeding up, the man slowed. Almost casually, he stepped round a gnarled root, as though he had all the time in the world, as though he knew exactly where each obstacle lay. Her nostrils flared. Was he mocking her? She padded closer, her steps noiseless on the damp soil. She kept low, muscles coiled, every sense sharpened. She tasted the air with her forked tongue, an old instinct checking for changes in scent, in temperature, in subtle traces of fear. Instead, she sensed something else, something unfamiliar. The ground ahead was scarred, not naturally, but intentionally. Strange carvings cut into the earth, spirals and lines forming sigils she didn't recognize. They pulsed faintly, not with light but with resonance, as if echoing a frequency her ears weren't meant to hear. Fresh human-made, her tail twitched with irritation. She knelt to inspect one of the carvings. Her fingers hovered above it, feeling a faint vibrational hum. It wasn't magic. Her people knew the taste of magic like they knew the taste of blood. This was different, something crude yet clever. A mechanism, a trick, a trap. Humans were not known for such artistry. She leaned in closer, sniffing the grooves, tracing the edges of the carved lines. They weren't shallow scratches. They were deliberate, carved with precision and purpose. Why would a human dig symbols into the forest floor while being pursued? For protection, for warning, for misdirection. The question barely formed before a sharp crack split the air. The sound of a twig snapping behind her. Every instinct in her body reacted at once. She turned in a single explosive movement, claws sliding out fully, fangs bared in a hiss. Her silhouette, once one with the darkness, now sharpened like a blade drawn in moonlight. But the forest behind her was empty, no human, no movement, only stillness. Her ears swiveled, scanning for heartbeats. Nothing, not from him, not from anyone. The trees creaked softly in the wind, but that was all he had been there. She was certain of it. The scent lingered, faintly disturbed bark on the tree trunk, the whisper of displaced air where a body had stood, yet he had vanished. Her grip tightened. She did not like puzzles. She did not like prey that vanished, and she certainly did not like prey that behaved as though they were watching her. She rose slowly, posture shifting from predator poise to something more cautious. The sigils gave off a faint, shimmering vibration. When she stepped backward, the feeling intensified as though crossing an invisible threshold. Something in the air changed, grew thicker. It wasn't just the human she sensed now. Someone or something else washed from deeper in the woods. Her heart gave one heavy, deliberate thump. Her claws retracted slightly as she turned in a slow circle, scanning the treetops, the ground, the shadows. A twig fell from above and struck the earth softly. She looked up. Nothing but the forest didn't lie. The forest told her there was a presence, just out of sight. A presence she hadn't sensed in years. Her clan, her rivals, something ancient, something hunting her. It didn't matter, she didn't feel like the hunter anymore. A subtle, unfamiliar pressure crept into her chest. not fear. Lyra had never feared anything living. It was something worse than uncertainty. She lowered herself into a defensive stance, breath steadying as the darkness around her seemed to tighten. Closing in like a throat, she called out into the trees, voice low, dangerous, show yourself. The forest responded with silence, and in that silence she understood one thing with icy clarity. This wasn't her hunt. She had stepped into someone else. And whoever they were better at disappearing than any human she had ever seen. For the first time that night, she realized she no longer knew who the prey was or if she'd been the prey all along. The rain finally broke. At first it came as a whisper, a soft pattering lost among the rustling leaves, but within moments it intensified into a cold, relentless downpour, turning the forest floor into a glistening mosaic of puddles and mud. Water dripped from the high canopy in silver threads, striking the ground with rhythmic insistence. The night's shadows stretched, blurred, then sharpened again as lightning flickered between the towering trees. Lyra stood perfectly still. The sigils carved into the earth glowed faintly, brighter now that the rain filled their grooves. She hadn't seen such markings since the war schools of her youth, where elders trained hunters using ancient territorial symbols. But these weren't the same. These were human, imperfect, but somehow effective. A cold ripple crept up her spine. Someone had designed these symbols with intent. A silence settled over the forest, broken only by the rain. Lyra turned slowly, scanning every direction, every branch, every hollow tree trunk. Then a voice drifted out from behind a cedar to her left. You're faster than the others. Her head snapped toward the sound. The man stepped into the open as though stepping through a curtain of mist, letting the rain soak into his clothes, his hair plastering to his forehead. He wasn't panting. He wasn't trembling. His eyes held none of the wild desperation she had come to expect from those she hunted. Instead, he looked at her with unsettling calm, as if he had been waiting for her. A slow hiss escaped her throat. Show yourself, pray. He didn't flinch. He didn't even react. Instead, he walked toward her, not close enough to be suicidal, not far enough to suggest fear. He kept a deliberate distance, as though he already understood the exact range of her claws. You've been following me, she said. No, he replied, shaking water from his hands casually. You've been following me exactly where I needed you to go. The audacity in his tone made her upper lip twitch. Humans sometimes grew bold when trapped or delirious, but this was different. He spoke with the certainty of someone delivering a fact, not a taunt. Lyra stepped toward him, each muscle coiled with lethal intent. You presume too much. I presume exactly enough. Her claws unsheathed with a soft click. Moonlight glanced off the curved black talons, long enough to tear through bone. He didn't even blink. Instead, his gaze dropped to the glowing markings beneath her feet. The rainwater made the sigils shine like molten metal. You notice them, he said. Good. Lyra felt irritation flare. What are these? She demanded, snarled. Who taught you such tricks? He tilted his head slightly. Who says humans can't learn? The markings pulsed. The ground trembled beneath her feet. Her instincts screamed a warning, but she moved too late. A thin line of light shot up from the nearest carved symbol and arched into the air, connecting to another carved mark, then another, and another. Blue fire raced around the perimeter in a complete ring. The sigils ignited. A crackling surge of energy burst upward, forming a dome of shimmering blue light, a barrier that enclosed her in a cage of humming power. Lyra snarled and slammed her palm against the barrier. Pain exploded up her arm. The energy recoiled violently, sparks dancing across her skin. She stumbled back, teeth bared. The man stood just outside the crackling dome, hands tucked into his wet pockets, watching her with calm, almost analytical curiosity. This wasn't about killing you, he said. Her chest heaved with restrained fury. Then what do you want? His eyes met hers. To talk. His tone wasn't mocking, wasn't fearful. It was steady, measured, controlled. It infuriated her more than any scream would have. She paced inside the barrier, testing its boundaries, searching for a weak point, a flaw, a fracture, anything. But every time her claws touched the shimmering wall, the energy surged violently, forcing her back. Trapped by a human, the humiliation burned hotter than the electricity. You think humans are born prey, he continued calmly. Weak, predictable, easy to control. He nodded toward her claws. Easy to kill. That is what you are, she spat. But you never questioned why your people have never hunted my kind. She paused. His kind. He raised an eyebrow slightly, as though amused by her confusion. You've hunted humans for years, he said, but you've never encountered anyone like me. And what are you? She demanded. He took a slow step closer to the barrier. The energy rippled but did not harm him. A human who knows the truth. Lightning split the sky above them, illuminating the forest in a blinding flash. The barrier's glow intensified, humming like a swarm of angry insects. Lyra narrowed her eyes. What truth? That you are not here by your people's choice. He gestured around them. None of this is natural. Not the hunt. Not the rituals. Not the forest. It is all designed. Lies, she hissed. He smiled slightly, not in mockery but in sad understanding. You weren't sent here for sport. Your people didn't choose this ground. They didn't build the trials. You don't control this place. The rain hammered harder, bouncing off the glowing dome around her. She stared at him, muscles taut. My people rule this territory, she said coldly. No, he whispered. They're allowed to rule it. Because someone else wants them to. Lightning struck again, closer this time. The sigils flickered brightly, he continued. Your clan isn't in charge. They're being observed, manipulated, pushed into conflict. You speak nonsense. And yet, he said, pointing at the ground, you stepped exactly where I wanted you to without realizing it. She followed his gesture. The sigils formed more than a trap. They formed a pattern, a summoning, a map, a beacon, a signal. Her heart throbbed once, heavy and sharp. What are you trying to say? She snarled at the real hunters. He whispered as thunder boomed overhead. Aren't us, or your people? The barrier suddenly pulsed with blinding light. The ground shook. A crack tore through the earth, ripping the sigils apart. Lyra lunged instinctively. Just as the dome collapsed, she burst free in a flash. Claws inches from the man's throat, he rolled aside, swift and disciplined, dirt flying from under his boots as he came up in a kneeling position. They're coming, he said, chest rising with controlled breaths. She demanded. A rumble echoed through the forest far deeper than thunder. He met her gaze, rain dripping from his lashes. Your people, she stiffened, but they're not coming to hunt me. He stood slowly. They're coming to hunt you. The forest seemed to inhale sharply, leaves rattling, and Lyra finally understood. She had stopped being the hunter the moment she stepped onto the carved ground, and now someone, human or otherwise, had changed the rules of the hunt entirely. The forest's heartbeat changed. It was subtle at first, a tremor beneath the soaked soil, a faint shiver in the branches overhead. Lyra felt it before she fully heard it, the way a predator senses another moving in their territory. The rain softened for a moment, as if even the storm paused to listen. Something ancient stirred, something familiar, something dangerous. She tightened her stance, muscles coiling like drawn wire. The man-kid, as he'd later claimed, straightened slowly, wiping mud off his palm with an almost infuriating calmness. His eyes never left her. You feel it, don't you? He said quietly. Feel what? She growled, though her body already knew the answer. He gestured upward with a tilt of his chin. The ground, the trees, they're responding to them. Them, she repeated, voice dropping into a low, warning tone. The hunters who taught you everything, he said. The ones who told you humans were prey. The ones who trained you to kill anything that questioned the narrative. Her jaw clenched, fangs pressing against her lower lip. You speak as though you know my clan. I know their purpose. He stepped closer. Not foolishly close, he kept a deliberate distance, just outside her immediate strike range. I know why they hunt, why they push you, why they keep the truth from you. She let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Rain ran down her cheekbones, dripping from the tips of her claws. You think you understand my people. You think a human could understand anything about us. Not all humans, he said softly. Just me. She stared at him. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. The stormlight reflected in his eyes, revealing something hard, calculating, and painfully aware. Not bravado, not delusion. Knowledge. He knew, too much for any ordinary human. Her tail flicked once, a sign of agitation. She began pacing the perimeter of the clearing, attempting to regain control of the situation, to reclaim her dominance. But the sigils broken on the ground still pulsed faintly, their energy struggling to reform. Each flicker reminded her that she had been trapped, manipulated, and that he had orchestrated it. Why did you bring me here? She demanded, voice deepening. To humiliate me, to provoke me, to die in some dramatic spectacle. No, he said simply. To show you something. Her lips curled. Show me what? The truth. She stopped pacing. For a long moment, they only stood there, inches apart, but worlds away. Rainwater dripped from her hair, sliding down the ridges of her neck, tracing the lines of her armored skin. Cade's clothes clung to his frame, drenched and heavy, but his posture remained impossibly steady. Then he crouched down beside one of the broken symbols still faintly glowing in the mud. Do you know why these work on you? He asked. She stiffened. Because they are stolen fragments of ancient hunter wards. Partially, he said, but mostly they work because they weren't designed by humans. She frowned. Explain. Lightning ripped through the sky, bathing the clearing in stark white for a heartbeat. When the darkness returned, he spoke. Your people didn't invent the ritual of the hunt. They were given it. Her breath hitched. He continued, voice low and steady, like someone reciting a truth he'd carried far too long. There are others, Lyra, older than your clan, older than your species. They built this place. They built the trials. They set the rules. And they need you to believe you are predators so they can study the cycle of violence. She scoffed instinctively, but the sound rang hollow, because deep inside, in the place she'd buried under years of training, there had always been questions. Why were humans allowed to live freely in designated zones? Why were hunts ritualized instead of uncontrolled warfare? Why did the elders forbid hunters from exploring beyond certain borders? Why was questioning the rights considered treason? Her heartbeat quickened. You're lying, she said, but her conviction wavered. If I were lying, he said, they wouldn't be coming. A low rumble shook the ground, stronger than before. The leaves overhead shivered violently as though something massive moved through them. Lyra turned sharply, scanning the tree line. A scent hit her nose, familiar, bitter, metallica. Clan. She froze, every muscle in her body going rigid. It wasn't possible. She had left them hours ago. She was alone on this sanctioned hunt. Her people never interfered. Intervention was disgraceful, against the code, unless the code was only for the hunters, not for the ones who controlled them. She inhaled again and the scent deepened. Not the presence of a scouting party, not a lone warrior. An entire hunting legion. Her stomach tightened. Cade stood and wiped rain from his brow. They're not coming to kill me, he said quietly, or the other humans in the forest. She turned toward him sharply. Then why? Then she saw something in his eyes. A softness, a fleeting sympathy. For you, he finished. The word struck harder than any blow. Lyra stumbled back a step, tail lashing. Why would they turn on me? I've done nothing but honor the rights. I've upheld every hunt. You broke the most important rule, he whispered. Her throat tightened. What rule? You hesitated. The forest roared suddenly. Not with thunder. With voices. Her clan's war cry. She felt it in her bones. A note of pure judgment slicing through the night air. It was a sound used only for one purpose, to condemn. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. They wouldn't. They will, he said. Because if you hesitated, if you questioned even for a second, it means you're capable of doubt, and doubt is the one thing the architects of this world can't allow. A rustle of massive bodies moved in the darkness beyond the trees. The glow of torches flickered between branches. Her people were close, too close. Lyra's vision blurred for a moment, the rain mixing with a shock she wasn't accustomed to feeling. Betrayal, her clan, her blood, her life, turning on her. Her claws flexed involuntarily. She wanted to deny it, wanted to tear Cade's throat out, just to silence his words, but the truth was already coiling like ice in her chest. He wasn't lying. Her people were hunting her, not because she had failed, but because her mind had started to open. The storm rumbled violently, and Cade stepped back, giving her space. He did not approach. He did not threaten. He simply watched, waiting to see what she would do now that she knew the hunt had been flipped for the first time. Lyra didn't know what role she played. Hunter. Betrayer. Target. And somewhere deep in the forest, her clan screamed her death sentence into the storm. The night was colder than any before, but Jason didn't feel it. He barely felt anything at all except the pounding of his heart and the raw ache in his bruised ribs as he walked through the quiet streets of the outpost. Every step reminded him of the fight he had survived, of the four-armed giant who had nearly crushed him, and of the daughter whose eyes had watched everything. His muscles burned, his skin stung, and yet, beneath all the pain, something electric pulsed in him, something he couldn't deny anymore. He wasn't supposed to stay. That had been the rule. Humans weren't meant to linger in Valari settlements, not after conflicts, not after confrontations, and definitely not after challenging a chieftain. But as Jason reached the door of their home, the widow's home, he felt the strange certainty that leaving now would be the real defeat, that running away from what had bloomed between them would be more cowardly than facing her father. Again, light seeped through the cracks of the wooden door. He raised his hand and knocked once. For a moment there was no sound, only the distant wind moaning between metal rooftops. Then the latch slid, and she appeared calm, her four graceful arms holding a cloth, a cup, a knife, and nothing at all. Her eyes widened when she saw him, surprise melting into something Jason couldn't quite read. Relief, worry, maybe both. You should be resting, she said, stepping aside for him to enter. Her voice held that quiet firmness he'd come to recognize. She spoke gently, but her words always carried weight. Jason walked in slowly. The room glowed warm, almost golden, in contrast to the dark, frigid night outside. He took in the scent of herbs simmering in a small pot, the soft hum of heat crystals, the faint traces of incense lingering in the corners. Everything in this place reminded him of her, calm, steady, resilient. I can't rest, he said after a moment. Not until I know. She froze halfway through setting the cup on the table. Know what? Jason swallowed hard. Last night he had fought for his life under the eyes of her tribe. He had been battered, bruised, nearly crushed. And yet somehow this moment, speaking plain words to her, felt harder. Why, you asked me, he said. Why, you said you didn't need a worker. You needed a father. Her breath hitched, and she turned away, as if suddenly remembering the pot on the fire. That was the truth, she murmured. Nothing more. There's more, Jason said quietly. I saw it in your eyes. She halted again, the room falling to silence except for the faint bubbling from the pot. For a long while she didn't look at him. Her four hands moved, but only to steady themselves against the table. When she finally turned, the truth she had hidden so carefully flickered across her face. You are brave, she said slowly, each word chosen with care. And kind. You treat my daughter not as a burden, but as someone worth protecting. You give without asking anything back. In this world, that is rare. Jason felt his pulse thrum. So that's it. No, she whispered. Her voice dropped lower. That is not all. She walked closer. Not like a warrior approaching a threat, but like someone stepping toward something fragile, something she feared might vanish if she moved too quickly. Jason's breath caught as she reached him, one hand brushing lightly against his bruised cheek. Her touch was soft, but it sent a shock through him, awakening every emotion he had tried to push down. "You risked your life," she said, her eyes glowing softly in the lamplight. "Not for honor, not for pride, but for us." Jason wanted to speak, but no words came out, not when her other hands rose, one resting against his chest, one holding his wrist, one hovering uncertainly near his shoulder, as though afraid to cross a line. "You asked me what I meant," she said. "When I told you I needed a father, I meant someone who would stand beside us, someone who would not abandon us when things turned difficult, someone who sees us not as aliens, not as outsiders, but as a family." His voice cracked. "And you think that's me?" "I know it is." For a long moment they stood there, the world outside fading until only the warmth of the room remained. Jason reached up, gently taking the hand on his cheek, guiding it to rest against his jaw. She didn't pull away. If anything, she stepped closer. "You should know," she whispered, "that choosing us, choosing me, will not be easy. My people will question it. Humans will judge it. And my father." Jason let out a breathless laugh. "Your father already tried to break every bone in my body. And still you stand." He met her eyes. "I'd stand again." Her expression softened, the faintest smile curving her lips. She looked at him the way one looks at a door that has always been closed only to find it open for the first time. "Then if you truly want this," she said, "if you want us, stay." The word echoed in him. Stay didn't hesitate. "I want to." For the first time since he'd met her, all four of her hands found him, one resting on his chest, two sliding around his back, one gently lifting his chin. "Not possessive, not desperate, simply certain." "Then you are not alone anymore," she whispered. He leaned into her, feeling her warmth, her strength, her quiet steadiness. Outside, the night wind howled, but in here there was only silence, only breath, only two souls who had spent too long fighting the world alone. Now they no longer had to. Her daughter peeked from the doorway, her small eyes curious. Jason straightened slightly, expecting her to be afraid or confused. Instead, she ran to him and wrapped both her tiny arms around his leg. "You stayed?" she said softly. Jason placed a gentle hand on her head. "I did." The widow watched them, her eyes glistening, not with sorrow this time, but with something deeper, something long overdue. She nodded once, a gesture filled with acceptance, trust, and a promise that needed no words. Jason exhaled, feeling the weight of his wandering years lift off his shoulders. After all the battles, all the losses, all the drifting, he had finally found something worth fighting for. A home, a family. And for the first time in a long time, he let himself believe he deserved it.